You're at Chipotle, and you're doing the math on whether guacamole is actually happening today. Not whether you want it, but whether you can. You make $38,000 a year, which means you earn more than roughly a third of all full-time American workers. The guacamole is $2.75. The math is still tight. Now picture someone else. Different city, same age, same hours in the workday, who booked a last-minute flight to Austin last Tuesday because tickets were cheap and she felt like going. Checked out, bought the ticket, didn't think about it again until she packed. Didn't do any math at all. These two people are not living different versions of the same life. They are living completely different lives. And here's the thing that should stop you cold. The gap between them isn't luck, and it isn't some massive salary difference. It's a specific, measurable threshold. Researchers actually have a name for it. My name is Nick, and today we're going to find it. Before we talk about what different paychecks actually buy you, let's establish where everyone is standing, because most people dramatically misread their position on the American income ladder, and that misreading costs them. The median household income in America right now is $83,730. That is not one high earner. That is the entire household. Everyone working under that roof combined. The median individual full-time worker earns around $62,000. So when two people say, we're doing fine, we make six figures together, they are describing a household income that is about average, not rich, not poor, just median. Pew Research puts roughly 30% of Americans in a low-income household under $56,000 combined. The core middle class runs $75,000 to $125,000. Only about 10% of households crack $250,000. And here's the fact, almost nobody in financial media bothers to mention 42.8% of American households now earn over $100,000. Sounds like a lot of comfortable people, except when you run the actual monthly numbers, which we are about to do in detail, you realize that $100,000 in Chicago is a completely different financial reality than $100,000 in Lubbock, Texas. Smart Asset ran the data. A $100,000 salary in Manhattan has the purchasing power of just $30,362 in real terms. $30,000. The same paycheck, two different cities, two completely different lives. So what we're really asking today isn't what does your salary say? It's a single question for every income level. At what point does money start working for you instead of the other way around? Let's find out. We'll follow someone through every step. Meet Marcus, he's 29. He works in logistics operations for a regional shipping company in the suburbs of Atlanta. He makes $38,000 a year, which after federal taxes, state taxes, and FICA, lands him with about $2,375 a month in actual take-home. That's it. That's the whole board. Now let's watch what happens to it. Rent first, because rent always comes first. A decent one-bedroom in the Atlanta suburbs runs about $1,100 a month. There goes $1,100. And Marcus hasn't bought a single thing to eat yet. Utilities, $175. Marcus needs a car because nothing is walkable in suburban Atlanta, and the jobs certainly aren't on the bus line. So there's $350 for a used car payment and another $300 for insurance and gas. Groceries on the USDA's thrifty plan, because Marcus is not eating fancy, $370. Phone and internet, because you cannot exist professionally without them, $120. Health insurance employee share, $130. Student loans on income-driven repayment, $300. Total, $2,845 a month. Take home, $2,375 a month. Marcus is spending $470 more than he earns before he's paid for a cup of coffee, a copay, a birthday dinner, or a single unexpected anything. This isn't bad budgeting. This is the math physically refusing to add up regardless of how disciplined he is. Here's what this actually feels like, and I want you to sit with this for a second. It feels like Scanning groceries at self-checkout and doing the running total in your head, quietly putting the nice shampoo back when the number gets too close. It feels like lying to your friends that you're not really hungry when they suggest a restaurant, because that's less humiliating than saying you genuinely cannot afford the appetizer. It feels like doing math on whether your car can go one more week without an oil change, because $85 is not a small number when you're running a deficit, and the system has a very specific relationship with Marcus. Overdraft fees hit people who can't maintain a balance. Payday lenders charge 300% APR to people who can't wait 2 weeks. Rent-to-own furniture extracts double the retail price from people who can't pay up front. The less money you have in America, the more expensive everything becomes. That's not a bug in the system. That is the system's entire business model for this income tier. And Marcus is their most profitable customer. Let's say Marcus gets a significant promotion 5 years later. He's now earning $65,000 a year. His monthly take-home jumps to roughly $4,252. The budget can now technically balance. He exhales for the first time in half a decade. Except rent has crept up because he can afford something slightly nicer. $1,350 now. Car payment on something slightly more reliable, $400. Car insurance and gas, $330. Groceries upgraded from survival level to moderate, $430. Student loans, which don't care about his raise, $400. Health insurance, $135. Phone and internet, $125. And now, finally, Marcus has some actual discretionary spending. A gym membership, the occasional dinner out, one streaming service he actually watches, call it $250 total. $3,610 monthly surplus, $642. If Marcus is disciplined, and let's say he is because he's been white-knuckling it for 5 years and he knows what the alternative feels like, $325 of that goes into a 401k at 6% to capture the employer match. That leaves $317 a month for savings. At that rate, a 3-month emergency fund of roughly $10,800 takes 17 months to build, assuming nothing goes wrong for a year and a half, which it will. But here's what fragility actually feels like at $65,000. It feels like finally being able to breathe, and then the check engine light comes on and the breathing stops. It feels like telling yourself you're doing okay because you're not overdrafting anymore, while quietly knowing that one bad month, one job interruption, one medical bill, one transmission resets the entire clock. It feels like you've upgraded from drowning to treading water, and everyone around you is congratulating you on how great you're swimming. The check engine light costs $800 to fix. Marcus has $317 of surplus a month. He's 2.5 months from being able to cover it. If he stops saving entirely, so the credit card comes out. Not because Marcus is irresponsible, because the margin is so thin that any deviation from a perfect month breaks the math. Here's who profits from this specific situation. Banks, who charge 24% APR on the credit card Marcus just had to use for the repair he couldn't cover. The system doesn't care that Marcus got a raise, it just adjusted the price of the trap. Marcus grinds for a few more years, changes companies, negotiates hard. Now he's earning $100,000, 6 figures, the milestone everybody treats like a finish line. Take home about $6,158 a month. That's $1,906 more per month than he was taking home at $65,000. Let's stop there for a second because this number deserves a moment of silence. Marcus got a $35,000 raise, a $35,000 gross income increase, and after the federal government, the state, and FICA finished with it, his $35,000 raise became $1,906 a month. That's what a $35,000 raise actually buys you. $2,000 a month, roughly. File that away. Now, the budget. A nice 2-bedroom or starter home mortgage in a mid-cost city, $1,800. Utilities, $225. Car payment, maybe something made in this decade, $500, insurance and gas, $350, good groceries, $465, phone and internet, $130, health insurance, $150, student loans, $450, and an actual life. Gym, dining out, the occasional weekend trip, $500, total $4,570, remaining $1,588 a month. Put 10% into the 401k, $833 a month, and Marcus has $755 left. A 6-month emergency fund takes under a year to build. He can absorb a financial shock without spiraling. He can say no to things without it being a crisis. Here's what $100,000 actually unlocks, and it's more specific than people realize. It's the first time Marcus wakes up in the morning and doesn't immediately think about money. That's not a small thing. That is the entire product. Months of not thinking about money. The absence of financial dread is itself a form of wealth, and most Americans never experience it. But, and this is where the tile flips, Marcus is not rich. Not even a little. Maxing his 401k at $23,500 a year would cost him $1,958 a month. His entire surplus after basic expenses is $1,588. He cannot simultaneously max retirement savings and save anything else. Something always has to give, and if Marcus lives somewhere real, Seattle, Denver, Washington, D.C., that $1,800 rent is probably $2,800. The budget falls apart again, and we're back to treading water in a nicer zip code. A $100,000 salary is like being a good swimmer in a current. You're no longer drowning. You can make real progress, but you're still swimming, and the current is still running. Marcus lands a senior role. $150,000 a year. Take home about $8,830 a month. Now let's watch the math stop being cruel for once. Mortgage on a proper home, $2,200. Utilities, $275. Car payment, not extravagant but comfortable, $600. Insurance and gas, $385. Good groceries, $500. Phone and internet, $140. Health insurance, $160. Student loans, still there, still annoying, $450. Real discretionary spending, actual vacations, the full version of being a human adult, $1,000. Total, $5,710, remaining $3,120 a month. Marcus can now max his 401k, all $1,958 of it, fund a backdoor Roth IRA, and still have hundreds left over to invest in a taxable brokerage. He can build a 6-month emergency fund in under 5 months. He can say yes to things. The decision-making framework shifts from, can I afford this, to, do I actually want this? That is not a subtle difference. That is the whole game. Here's the data that matters. The BLS and BEA ran joint research on personal savings rates by income quintile. They're finding personal savings are functionally negative for the bottom 3 income quintiles, meaning roughly 60% of American households spend more than they earn when you account for debt. Only the top 2 quintiles consistently save. Real, compounding, wealth-building savings doesn't begin in earnest until around $100,000 to $150,000 in household income. Think of it this way. At $35,000, every dollar Marcus earns is like a goldfish in a tank full of slightly larger fish. It enters the account, exists briefly, and then something eats it. At $150,000 for the first time, some of the dollars survive long enough to have kids. That's compounding. That's the whole trick. And you cannot access it until you have margin, and you cannot have margin until the fixed costs stop consuming everything. And the fixed costs stop consuming everything right around here. That's the tipping point. Not $75,000, not the mythologized 6 figures. $150,000 is where Marcus stops trading time for survival and starts trading time for freedom. And the compounding from here is not subtle. A 35-year-old who maxes their 401k and invests another $1,000 a month into a basic index fund, consistent, automated, boring, is looking at roughly $2.2 million by age 65. Not because they're a genius, not because they got lucky, because they had enough margin to let time do the math, and they didn't let lifestyle creep eat the surplus before the automation kicked in. Here's the part of this video that made me stop and stare at my screen when I was researching it. Goldman Sachs surveyed Americans on paycheck to paycheck living across every income bracket. And what they found was not what anybody expected. Among households earning $200,000 to $300,000, just 16% live paycheck to paycheck. That's the sweet spot. The most financially stable bracket in America. Then you look at $300,000 to $500,000. The paycheck to paycheck rate jumps back up to 41%. And above $500,000, 40%, the exact same rate as households earning under $50,000. Let that land. People earning $500,000 a year and people earning $45,000 a year, live paycheck to paycheck at essentially identical rates. The two ends of the American income spectrum mirror images of each other in the one metric that actually measures financial stress. This is not a story about income. This is a story about lifestyle inflation, the invisible, silent, perfectly efficient force that expands to consume every dollar you make, regardless of how many dollars that is. At $45,000, you spend everything because you have to. At $500,000, you spend everything because your brain has quietly reclassified a $4,500 monthly car payment, a $9,000 mortgage, private school tuition at $42,000 per kid, and a vacation home with $3,500 a month in carrying costs as just the baseline, normal. What people at your level do, earning $500,000 a year and still having nothing left over, is the financial equivalent of running a marathon and ending up at the starting line. Except somehow you're exhausted, broke, and your Range Rover needs new brakes. The $200,000 to $300,000 sweet spot is where income has briefly outrun the lifestyle arms race, where there's margin before the spending has had a chance to catch up. It's the narrow window between enough and a more expensive version of not enough. And here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. A Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia study found that when someone in a neighborhood wins a significant sum of money, the bankruptcy rates of their neighbors go up. The mechanism, visible wealth triggers visible spending. More money doesn't automatically create more security. It creates a higher floor of spending required to feel normal. And that floor rises faster than almost anybody anticipates. At $250,000, Marcus's monthly take-home is about $14,207. The math is now comically in his favor, on paper. Mortgage on a genuinely nice home, $3,000. A car that doesn't embarrass him at client dinners, $750. Premium groceries, the ones where the produce actually looks like produce, $600. Real discretionary spending, travel, dinners, some luxury, $2,500. Charitable giving, because Marcus has been Marcus, and he remembers every version of this, $500. Total, $8,450, remaining $5,757 every single month. Max the 401k, fund the backdoor Roth, contribute to a 529 for the kid, put the rest in a taxable brokerage. Marcus is now investing roughly $69,000 a year. At 8% average annual returns, that's over $8.5 million in 30 years from consistent index fund fall asleep at the wheel investing. No stock picking, no crypto, no scheme, just time and margin. But the Goldman data doesn't care about Marcus's good intentions. 40% of households at this income level live paycheck to paycheck. Because private school plus a boat plus 2 luxury leases plus we only fly business now is also a lot of money. The number on the paycheck changes. The gap between the paycheck and the lifestyle does not have to, but for 40% of people at this level, it doesn't. The trap just got bigger, more comfortable, and significantly harder to see from the inside. Now, here's a question almost no one asks when they're chasing an income milestone. What level actually makes you happy? Not rich, happy. Killingsworth and Kahneman, the two researchers who famously disagreed about this for a decade, published a joint paper in 2023 after combining their data. What they found: for about 80% of people, happiness keeps rising with income at every level. No plateau. More money, more happiness all the way up. But for the unhappiest 20%, people dealing with serious depression, grief, chronic illness, broken relationships, happiness stops rising at roughly $100,000 to $110,000. Beyond that, more money doesn't touch what's actually wrong. You cannot lifestyle creep your way out of a mental health crisis. You cannot buy your way out of a failing marriage. And the miseries that remain at $500,000 are not the kind that a bigger paycheck solves. And then there's this. Stanford research tracking 1.4 billion tax records found that the richest 1% of men live 14.6 years longer than the poorest 1%. At age 40, a wealthy man can statistically expect to reach 87, a poor man 72. That is not a quality of life difference, that is a completely different quantity of life. Financial stress is a public health crisis that we've normalized so completely, it barely registers as one anymore. So here's what everything we've covered today adds up to. The threshold, the real one based on actual savings data, not what feels right, is somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 in household income, depending on where you live. Below that, the system runs you. The fixed costs of being a functioning adult in America consume everything, and you are perpetually one piece of bad luck from a reset. Above that, you start running the system, the margin compounds. Over time, the compounding produces something that actually resembles wealth. But the Goldman Sachs U-curve tells us the most important truth in this entire video. The threshold is a doorway, not a destination. Walking through it doesn't automatically make you financially secure. What makes you financially secure is structuring your fixed costs below your income and holding that line while the difference accumulates in boring index funds for 20 or 30 years. The paycheck is not the variable. The gap is, and the gap is always a choice, except at the tiers where the math simply refuses to cooperate no matter how disciplined you are. And that's the part the system never tells you. Below a certain income, the game is genuinely rigged. Above it, the only thing rigging it is you. Here's what I want you to do before you close this tab. Open your bank account right now, not tomorrow, right now. Add up your fixed costs, rent or mortgage, car payment, insurance, loans, subscriptions, everything that leaves your account whether you like it or not. Then look at your take home. The gap between those two numbers is the only financial number that actually matters. Everything else, the salary, the title, the house, is scenery. If that number made you uncomfortable, good. Uncomfortable is the beginning of change. If it surprised you in a good direction, you're already ahead of where you think you are. The people who build real wealth aren't the ones who earn the most. They're the ones who figured out early that financial security isn't a salary, it's a structure. And a structure can be built at almost any income level where the math doesn't flatly refuse to cooperate. Marcus started with guacamole math. The question is what you start with and what you build from here. If this video changed how you think about your money, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.